The whole football stadium is packed, sold out. Woo! It's coming your way.
It's in their genes, it's something that's in them, it's in their makeup, that's how they wired, and I believe that's why they still do it.
Pull that motherfucker in there. You're working over that thing.
That to me is passion. It's just passion for your craft, passion for everything that you've dedicated your life to, and to me it's such a cool trait.
You guys gotta digest what I say. Take what you like from what I say.
I think it's just a love of the sport.
Who are we to question that philosophy? Because of the love and the passion of the business. And I'm not saying these other guys aren't, but I know that's the motive behind them. Dory likes sharing his knowledge.
It's in your blood, and it's hard to let it go.
I understand the desire, the want to, the want out there and get it. My hat's off to them. If they want to do it, they're not getting hurt, they feel like they can still do it, go get it.
The cliche is he's forgotten more than I'll ever learn, but that's true.
You want to learn from the best.
Boom, boom. You understand what I'm saying?
It's not a lifestyle for everybody.
My business, which has always been there and been wonderful to me, and it's been the greatest thing that has ever happened to me as a wrestling business.
I'm gonna wrestle forever, if I have a choice.
If it hadn't been for people like Dory Funk Jr. and Terry, I don't know where the business would resemble.
There's such certain guys in our business that are like that, and God bless them, and because they're keeping a part of me alive, they're keeping a part of the business alive. The old man was the same way. The old man worked up until the days he was dying, you know.
My father was a great guy, a great man.
He was a World War II veteran. He was an amateur wrestler. He went to the University of Indiana.
He was an amateur wrestler there, and the war broke out, and he went to the service and came out of the service and turned pro.
Professional wrestling existed in Chicago, International Amphitheater, and he went down there and he wanted to be a wrestler. So they said, okay, kid, you wrestle the first match. And he would go in the ring and he would shoot with whoever he was wrestling against, and he'd get them hooked up and tied up in a knot, and he'd look out at the fans and thumbs up or thumbs down. And when the fans said thumbs down, he'd turn them over and pin their shoulders. And that's the way he got started as a professional wrestler. My father was my teacher. He was my coach. He was my guidance counselor. He was pretty much everything to me.
Most of the other kids wanted to be like Roy Rogers or Gene Autry or some cowboy or something like that, which they were big superstars. Whenever I was a kid, you know, and they wanted to act like him, and I never did do that. I just wanted to grow up and be like my father and be a professional wrestler. And that was always my lifetime dream.
Cal Farley started Boys Ranch, where I eventually worked. Dory Funk Sr. was there. He preceded me at Cal Farley's Boys Ranch. I got acquainted with Dory Funk in 1950.
Cal Farley was also a professional wrestler, but he was from the 30s and the 20s. And Cal went ahead and started Boys Ranch, and he needed somebody that could handle the kids. He had a superintendent out there that wasn't getting a job done, and the kids were running over him. And he needed somebody else, so he went ahead and he asked my father if he would do it. My father went out there and took it over and straightened it out.
Cal Farley's Boys Ranch is a boys ranch that was started by an old retired wealthy wrestler by the name of Cal Farley. It's 70 miles northwest of Amarillo, Texas. Has 250 boys. They're put there by the courts. They're there for many reasons. Maybe they were thieves, or maybe they were had no homes, or maybe they had bad homes, or maybe the kid got off on the wrong track one way or another, and they're put in this Cal Farley's Boys Ranch.
He actually started me in wrestling when I was only 7 years old. He was superintendent at a place called Texas Boys Ranch. He put the amateur wrestling program into play, and everybody on the ranch, 100 kids, high school down to first and second grade, were required to take amateur wrestling.
As a wrestler, you know, is that he came through the era of a different bunch of guys with a different attitude. Guys from my father's era, it was the very tough guys were entwined into the business too. And that made a great difference in the business, is the guys that were in it, all of your national champions, all your shooters were in the business, and all your workers were too.
He defeated Angelo Savoldi for the junior heavyweight championship of the world. And he was very proud of that because they had kind of tagged him, always the bridesmaid, never the bride, because he had so many matches with the great Luthez, Pat O'Connor, Whipper Watson, all for the world championship. And he finally got it. He finally became the bride. It wasn't easy though.
That little community up there, Amarillo and Canyon and that surrounding area where, you know, Senior was, you know, larger than life, and he was this TV personality and also a professional wrestler, and then Terry and them were coming up through the Canyon High School, I think, and you know, they were, so everybody knew that the Funks were part of a wrestling clan, I guess I'd call it.
Dory Funk Sr. had this incredible mythological reputation. You know, he and Iron Mike went 5 hours, Texas death match, and people stayed, you know. I mean, 5 hours, think about it. If they went to the ring at 9 o'clock, that's 9, 10, 11, 12. Well, yeah, 2 o'clock in the morning, people are still there watching it. Whether it happened or not, you tell it enough times, people start believing it.
Dory Funk Sr. was doing the same damn thing that Terry Funk does and Mick Foley does now, but he was doing it back then. So you talk about a trend-setting pioneer and a different character.
Dory Funk Sr. was one of the toughest men I ever probably met in my life. That's why his boys are so tough. Dory Funk Sr., oh man, he was unbelievable as a person.
Their old man was as tough as anybody I've ever seen. I met them all at the Atlanta City Auditorium, and I was very impressed with them. And their work was just, well, you know, legendary, as you know.
When I first met Dory Funk Sr., well, I was probably about 15, so I wasn't wrestling yet. But he was very bigger in life, that's how I remember. He had a pool, and he had a young wife, blonde, with a big set of knockers. He was kind of living the life, you know.
Three Funks had Senior, to start with, the old man, I heard he was a wild and crazy guy and hung around the bars all the time and beat rednecks up and, you know, would drink and fight and carry on out there in West Texas.
He was the biggest box office attraction in the Amarillo territory. And when the going got tough and they were selecting who was going to be the promoter, he was left out. So he walked out on the territory and went to Vancouver, British Columbia, and became a big box office attraction up there.
My father maneuvered around, and Doc Sarpolis, he needed my father. He got over so well in the panhandle of Texas with the people and the fans, and not only the panhandle, but the Texas area, that the promoter had to have him on the card in order to do business.
And they called him and asked him, they said, Dory Funk, we want you to come back. We have half of the territory, 50%, for you to share with the local promoter, Doc Sarpolis. He came back, became a promoter in Amarillo. A little later, Sarpolis passed away, and I was there, and he asked me if I would buy Sarpolis' widow off of the territory, which I did, and made payments, and he helped me make the payments. So it became my father and myself as the promoters in the Amarillo territory. Yeah, I went on past high school in amateur wrestling. I was actually West Texas AAU amateur wrestling champion. But at the same time, I was attending West Texas State University, double duty in that and football, and really had an enjoyable career as a football player for West Texas State University.
The most prolific university in the country for professional wrestlers was West Texas State University. And it just put out wrestler after wrestler after wrestler, you know.
The connection all goes, Dory Jr. played football at West Texas, you know, and Terry played football at West Texas. So, you know, there was that, you know, there was a connection, and of course they ended up being wrestlers after, you know, they got through playing football.
I don't know what the reason was, in the water or the training hall or what. I know that the academic standards to get into school were somewhat lax, I'm told. So it allowed some guys that had some issues in other schools to migrate there.
Terry and Dory both played football there. And, you know, they reached out to a number of people that they played with. And, I mean, the list is pretty incredible when you start really looking at it.
What really brought some of these great football players was wrestling brought them to that area too, you know. It's part of the recruiting. You know, they see the other guys that are in the business and everything, young guys do, you know, and they were coming out of high school, and, you know, if they had any interest in wrestling, watching it on TV or anything, that was the place to be, you know, and West Texas was too, you know.
It was really a happenstance that so many guys went through there, but you can trace it all back to the Funk's influence.
Yeah, and my father had always told me, you got to finish school before you can be a wrestler. So when the game was over, within a week I was in the ring wrestling, professional wrestler going on the Amarillo circuit.
I trained all of my life. I started wrestling whenever I was 4 years old.
Yes, I had some training, but really it was the eyes of my father. He would watch my matches, and he was very hard on me, especially as his kid. If I did something wrong, I would hear about it, no uncertain terms. If I did something right, that was expected.
Never once, and that was one thing that he never did. That was the one great thing that he did. My father would never, ever tell me that I had a good match. He never told me I had a good match. He never told my brother he had a good match. You know, whenever he didn't say anything, we knew we did good, you know. But he would go ahead and critique us all the time. And he continued to do that throughout his life. And we certainly continued to listen.
Not everybody can work under a system like that, but it fit for me. And fortunately, I was able to stay with it. And it was a system that I worked, I grew to love.
Those guys were a different kind of breed than I see today.
The name Funk was royalty in West Texas.
I was a big fan of both Dory and Terry. Both of them had different styles. And I'd like to think even with my brother Owen and I, we were different styles. Owen was more the high flyer, but we weren't wrestlers that mimicked each other. And I think I like that about Dory and Terry's. They weren't trying to be each other. They kind of branched off into flowered into completely different wrestlers. And that takes some ingenuity to do that right from the start, and I like that about both of them.
He made a lot of sacrifices for us, and he made a lot of sacrifices by being in the business at that time.
It's not tough love, it's true love, because he was always concerned about me. He always saw to it that I had the best opportunity and left it up to me to take advantage of the opportunities that he could open up. And he did open up some big opportunities.
That was the great thing about all of them, because it was real to them.
He was a member of the board of directors and had a large say in the direction of the National Wrestling Alliance.
Well, he was respected in all areas. And the reason he had such much respect for him is because he was a man of his word.
I think it was something that started long before his success of the Amarillo Territory, but the Amarillo Territory, for its size, was one of the hottest territories in professional wrestling for the population that we were working with.
The Amarillo Territory was, of course, run by Dory Funk Sr., and it was a blood and guts territory. It was a fighting territory.
I always loved how they ran Amarillo. It was a real serious wrestling territory. The matches were very solid, and the wrestling style was very realistic, and the names themselves were all a lot of names that I recognized from having one time or another passed through my dad's territory.
There was a guy that took a desert and turned it into a paradise for him and his sons, and did very well for many, many years.
He was a good man, and he paid properly. And I think that he had the respect among the wrestlers, you know. We had to pay properly because we had less population.
We didn't have the population of a New York or a Dallas, Fort Worth, even of Florida Championship Wrestling. But we still competed with them in the business that we did and the way we paid and took care of our wrestling talent.
They were making as much in the Amarillo area as they were in Florida, as they were in New York, as they were in, you know, very, very closely together, as they were in LA, you know. They made very, very good money in that area because my father realized that he had to pay them properly, and he couldn't go ahead and sneak off a few dollars and put it inside there or whatever. And the reason why was because of where we were.
It was a Wild West show out there, and so when you went out there, you kind of expected to be able to go for anything and adapt to anything. And with the guys that I named off and the crew that they had out there, it was a Wild West show out there. I enjoyed going, but it was also a very professional run organization and a very successful promotion.
Well, the Amarillo Territory was certainly a great stop for a lot of guys. A lot of guys went through the Amarillo Territory because Dory Sr. normally had really good talent there. Plus, they could work for him. He was very influential in the NWA, National Wrestling Alliance. So you got to get noticed there. Plus, Senior had a good relationship with a lot of the other NWA promoters. So if you did well in his territory, you're professional, you came to work on time, you worked hard, you improved, then the word would go out to all these other promoters of this young talent or this talent that we really like here, and when we get through, you might want to think about bringing him in.
They talk about trips in Oklahoma, Louisiana, but trips there were pretty long too.
Well, I can tell you the trips were Sunday Albuquerque, Monday El Paso, Tuesday Odessa, Wednesday Lubbock, Wednesday also Amarillo Television at the same time, 2 matches in one day. Thursday was Abilene, Texas. Friday was Colorado Springs or Pueblo. And then we started all over again. We drove into Albuquerque and we did the whole loop again. Every town ran every week. And every town did their capacity business every week. It was a fabulous business.
I think the Amarillo Territory, some of the trips are a little rugged, but that's just historically the same as most territories. Trips are part of the MO.
A lot of miles, but tremendous fun. And there was good money in it too, you know, guys. You know, it paid very well in comparison to other territories because they had to pay well in order to get the boys in.
I grew up in El Paso, so that was the first wrestling program I ever watched, and the Funks were the heroes right off the bat.
He set up his sons to be the heroes of the territory.
We had a great television show and shot a lot of stuff from the arena too, you know, that was great footage and everything. You know, where did it go? I don't know.
And the reason why there isn't a lot of footage is they would bicycle those tapes around. They would come back, reinsert
the interviews for the next stop in the bicycle, and they would go around, and then they were done, they would erase the whole tape and reuse it.
It was a mix. It was a combination of violence in professional wrestling, Texas death matches, Russian chain matches, barbed wire matches, but it was also a combination of absolutely great wrestling skill. I think the combination of wrestling in the Amarillo territory, along with the combination of violence, made it a very interesting territory.
You look back at that time and you just realize, you know, what a pool of talent all around pro wrestling. I mean, and that's just the Amarillo territory.
The great thing about it, I think, to speak of how good the territory was, I don't recall any viable opposition coming in there and running their territory. So that indicates to me that people either had fear or respect of the office in Amarillo, and they didn't want to tread on Dory Sr.'s territory. No trespassing.
The one thing that I liked about it is we had a tremendous respect for the business there. And if you didn't respect it, you got beat up.
I tend to think I was pretty well prepared for the NWA World Championship. It began before that. My father always said, you never learn unless you're in the ring with the greatest. So I had already had matches with Lou Thez, Pat O'Connor, Danny Hodge, Hiro Matsuda, all the great wrestlers in the wrestling business. Sonny Myers, he brought into the Amarillo territory and put me in with him so that I could learn from the best in the business. And there's no experience like that. If you never step in the ring with a great worker, you never learn. But when you step in the ring with that kind of talent, every match is a learning experience.
What he felt was more important than being champion, much more important than being champion, was able to put an ass every 18 inches. That was what he felt. And that's what he tried to prepare us for, and that's what he tried to accomplish with us. Just preparing to be hey, I want you to be the best you can. I want you to be a great wrestler. I want you to be the greatest. But as far as preparing for the champion, we didn't prepare for the champion. Of course, when the opportunity arose, well, then he did push for us to be champion.
He called us in and he says, I'm going to get one of you guys ready. It can't be two of you. And he said, it's got to be one of you guys because I can't prepare both of you and you'll split the vote. And before he could finish saying what he said, Terry looked at him and said, we're going with Dory. Just when he started talking, he said, we'll go with Dory. And that's the way we went. I didn't have a say in it.
Well, that was my brother that got ready, and I was elated. I certainly wasn't upset with it.
And we began right there preparing me for the NWA World Championship in Gene Kaniski. That is probably the first time in my career I was ever nervous. Not about my first match, too. It was quite an experience. But I had prepared for it, and I was so thrilled to be there. I was so happy that it was Gasparilla Day. There was a sellout crowd, Tampa Armory. There's nothing that will stick a fire up your butt like a sellout crowd, people going crazy, and it was that way in Tampa that night. The pressure was there, but I've always been able to relax and ease up on the pressure until the match was over. When the match was over, I literally jumped for joy.
To the sports world on a Tuesday night in Tampa, for him to come in and take the World Heavyweight Championship really changed all of wrestling.
What a hell of an honor to be the brother of the champion. The champion was, and he was a great champion. My brother was a great champion.
Finally, when I won the NWA World Championship from Gene Kiniski, Tampa, Florida, my father put his arm around me and said, "Kid, you've done a hell of a lot. You've accomplished a hell of a lot. If you do nothing else in the wrestling business, you've accomplished a hell of a lot, and I'm proud of you." And after waiting all that time, you can't imagine how much that meant to me. I was off and running. I was picked up Gene Kiniski's schedule, but it was a big thrill. More thrill and happiness than being nervous, because it's what you work for. The hard part is the training in the gym, which is where we were, studying the business, making the trips. That stuff is all hard work. Time away from family, that's difficult, that's hard. Different airplane, different city every day, that's hard. But performing in the ring is what it's all about. It's what you did all the hard work for.
300 nights a year, that's a long time, you know. And there's been a lot of great champions, don't misunderstand me. But he was one of them, you know, and he would go hour after hour after hour after hour after hour.
Dory really ushered in kind of a whole new era of wrestling.
Dory Funk Jr. is one of the classiest pro wrestlers there has ever been.
Dory Jr. was a great world champion because he could wrestle the fan favorites in the regions. He could wrestle the villains in the regions. He was so fundamentally sound. You get guys at a certain level like Dory Jr., they make everybody they wrestle better.
Dory was very, very smooth and he was great to be in the ring with. And it was really a pleasure to have a match with him.
He was just so athletically credible. He played the role of that champion defending that title, and everything he did looked credible, looked legitimate, but he still was an exciting wrestler and someone that was going to take something to conquer.
Dory Funk would come to the ring and he would wrestle you and have them standing on their feet within 30 minutes.
Dory Funk Jr., he was the consummate champion, the NWA. You think NWA champions, and they didn't leave that title on Dory Funk Jr. for 4.5 years, almost 5 years for nothing. They left it on him because he was doing business.
My career has been made on wrestling, and I think wrestling is going to be what's going to decide the winner of the match.
Nobody was a better ring general than Dory Funk Jr. I mean, he knew every high spot in the business and knew when to do it. His timing was spectacular.
Dory was not an imposing, like if Superstar Graham walked into the room, or even Bruno Sammartino, or especially somebody like Ric Flair. But Dory was just not an imposing figure like that. And that played well for him, because if Dory walked into a room and somebody say, "That's Dory Funk, he's the world champion," and people look at him and they say, "Man, I think maybe I could beat him."
That is the responsibility of the world champion, to create an opponent every time out. But it's only possible if you have somebody to work with that truly is tough, that truly is a great wrestler, that can truly convince the wrestling fans that he's a credible challenger. That's what drawing money for the promoter is all about. Well, I like to say I'm a competitive style wrestler, and for somebody to stay in the ring with me, they're going to have to be ready to go. And I mean, they're going to have to really they got to have my respect. So they either got to have wrestling skills, or they got to have fighting skills, or they got to be tough for one reason or another. Not everybody I wrestled was a great amateur wrestler.
Dory was this scientific wrestler, and they had the younger brother go in and try and beat the challenger. He was this wild, crazy guy.
But I would go ahead and I would go in there prior to my brother whenever he was champion, you know. And I would work with the guys that he was going to come in with. And it was very, very, very successful.
Quite often I would send my brother in as the eliminator, the guy that was going to eliminate my competition. And that was a tough thing to go through, a different style of wrestling. And if they got past my brother, they could have the booking with me. That was done quite often. It was quite successful. It was a box office attraction for the fans previous to me coming, and it set me up to be a box office attraction for the territories.
Dory Funk Jr. loved to wrestle 60 and 90-minute matches. And I just remember watching so many of his matches, especially against Jack Brisco, and I was always in awe because at that time the fans could watch a 60-minute or a 90-minute match and you wouldn't hear one boring chant because he knew how to do it.
Well, the rivalry between Dory Jr. and Jack Brisco was, you know, a match made in wrestling heaven. They complemented each other very well. They brought out the best in each other.
When Dory and Jack had their matches, they just knew. They didn't have to talk about it. They just felt it. And that's something you find with some guys you get in the ring and you have this connection with. And they had 60-minute matches all over the country. Then they come back with 90-minute matches and just tell this incredible story.
And I'd watch him and Jack Brisco in Florida. Jack Brisco was down there. He was a Florida heavyweight champion, and he was constantly trying to beat Dory for that belt, and they had some classics.
Dory Funk and Jack Brisco had some of the most classic matches you've ever seen. I saw a bunch on film. I saw one in person, and I was truly amazed at what talent they had, what talent both those men had.
He was such a good wrestler. He was so beautiful to wrestle. He was amateur wrestler all the way. He had the backing of Florida Championship Wrestling, Eddie Graham, and the National Wrestling Alliance. I went through Florida Championship Wrestling the first time, and the second time, and the third time, and wrestled quite a few people. We drew good, we did good business, but we didn't have that box office attraction that we knew every time, any place, we're going to sell out. And Jack Brisco filled that bill.
We started doing hour Broadways everywhere because the match was so popular and such a financial hit that we just started doing hour Broadways everywhere we went. We went all over the country and ended up in Japan, all over the world, doing hour Broadways.
There wasn't a country in the world or city in the United States or Canada or Mexico or the Caribbean that did not want to see that match.
They were at the top of their business at that time. Jack was hot in St. Louis. Jack was hot in Florida. Jack was hot in Georgia. Jerry was hot in the same areas because it was his brother. I was hot because of my brother being the world's champion, and it was Brisco on the chase, you know. And he had a very strong and productive promoter behind him, and Eddie Graham.
You say the Funks, and they'll immediately go back to the matches between the Briscos and the Funks. It's just magic in Florida.
It's big all over the world, and it had to be. There was a rivalry between it because look, you got two young guys. You know, both all four guys had just started out in the business. All four guys was trying to make their mark. All four guys had that similar Midwest background. You know, athletic and being able to go and everything. So it was a competition that made you better.
The Briscos versus the Funks was fabulous. I mean, just thinking that the Briscos were going to work against the Funks, brothers against brothers.
The Funks and Briscos, I think it was one of those natural matches that every promotion wanted in their territory, and just about every promotion in the United States got that match in their territory, and it proved to be business for them.
I wrestled Jack Brisco probably. I've got them all listed at home. I've got my list of 7,000 matches that I wrestled. But I wrestled Jack Brisco 150 times. And he was a fabulous opponent. He was and not only in Florida, but St. Louis. I wrestled him in Japan, Texas, Dallas, Texas, every territory across the country. I could walk in the ring with Jack Brisco, and we knew it was going to be a sellout, and we knew it was going to be a great wrestling match.
When you talk about Jack Brisco and Dory Jr., you're talking about two of the greatest in-ring performers of all time in any generation. If they were young today, and just starting out, they would be stars. Their style is certainly transcends generations.
It was a pickup truck accident on my father's ranch. And actually I was driving the pickup truck and we were chasing cattle, and when you're chasing cattle you're not always watching where you're going. So as the driver of the truck, I ran it right off a cliff. I say a cliff, it wasn't a cliff. It was about that high. But it was straight down into the river. And so we went nose first into the river, and I was really lucky to get out of the car. And I did smash through the windshield and had to jump out of the car real quick. My father got me out of the car, got me on dry land, and next thing I knew I was in the hospital in Amarillo, Texas. And I've actually got pictures of that hospital visit that are very famous. I've seen them everywhere. But that was a case of a bad accident, and I had no intention of going back into the ring until I was ready.
We got the news about Dory Funk Jr. being involved in the truck accident, and it was, I don't know, 2 weeks roughly before he was supposed to drop the belt to Jack Brisco in Houston, Texas. There was questions as to the credibility of what was happening, because Dory's dad, Dory Funk Sr., was a real manipulator, one of the real characters of wrestling. I say it with a smile because, I mean, he was great when I talked to him and then to learn from him as a kid. But he was a character and he was a manipulator, so you don't know what was going on there.
Dory knows what happened, and that's all that matters. And whatever happened, it happened. And you know what? It has a way of working itself out.
And I had pressure from Sam Mushnick, Bob Geigel, Harley Race, to get back in the ring soon, knowing what the NWA World title meant to the National Wrestling Alliance. So I did go back in the ring. I did go back too soon, and that is partially why I lost the belt to Harley Race.
Bottom line, when Dory Jr. finally came back to wrestling, they wanted that belt. The NWA did, Sam did, and he lost the title to Harley Race in Kansas City.
Being able to take the title from him worked good for him. It kept him from having another good guy in wrestling take it away from him. The bad guy got it.
Harley, early in his career, had many great matches with Dory Funk Jr., Dory Funk Sr., Terry Funk. There was a relationship there, so I think everybody felt that's the simplest way to do this.
I loved every minute of it, but I had a family at the same time. And the time away from home, the time away from family became more than I could handle. The work in the ring was the most pleasurable part of anything I did as a professional wrestler. That was the high, that was the gas up the rear end. That was what I loved to do. The time away from my kids and the time away from my wife at the time was costly. And that was the tough part.
4 years was a long time to hold that standard, the NWA Championship. And I think you can make a case that Dory Funk Jr. was that last great touring world champion for the NWA.
Dory'd have to be right at the top in my book. I mean, we have had a lot of good ones. Harley Race and Ric Flair and Lou Thez, the list goes on and on. They was all good. Dory was, you know, right when I was getting started, and I thought he was just first class, man.
He was one of our great champions because he had that ability to come to town, to face the top challenger, leave town still the champion, and have the challenger be elevated from what he was before that match took place.
A wrestling champion, a champion that always remembered it's not only about yourself. It's about your fans, it's about your opponents, and it's about the people you work for.
If you think of one of the greatest NWA champions of all time, I would definitely have to put Dory in there.
It was totally unexpected, yes.
Big loss to the whole entire business.
He used to laugh because they'd check his blood pressure in the dressing room, and he'd come out 120/80. And he'd talk about how old he was and how his blood pressure was better than anybody in the dressing room. It was never expected that my father would pass on from a heart attack.
My father was a wonderful man, and he had invited all of the boys out for barbecue, and we used to do that, and always broke down into the living room, you know, or the kitchen, and at this time it was the kitchen. And kind of pushed back all of the tables, and there were some benches in there that some of us were sitting on the benches, and Les Thornton said, I can get out of a front face lock, any front face lock, and my old man said, I don't think you can. And they hit the floor, you know, and they went all the way around the room, and sure enough, my father choked him out, you know, and he got up and he sat down on one of those benches, and I was next to him. He said, wasn't bad for an old man, was it? I said, no, it wasn't. And then he was there for about several minutes. And then he went outside, you know, and he went out the front porch. And my wife is out there and just on the porch, and he came out there and he says, tell Terry I think I'm having a heart attack. You know, he says, I think something's really, really wrong. So she came back in the house where I was still sitting down there in the kitchen, you know, right after that. And I went out there and had my wife go ahead and call an ambulance, and they got an ambulance out there.
And somebody came back in and said, your brother is left with your father. And they were gone to the Canyon Hospital. Canyon, Texas is 10 miles away. I jumped in the car and drove like crazy.
We went to Canyon, and then after Canyon, we went to a country doctor, and then he said, well, you've had a massive heart attack, and you know, Dory, we need to go ahead and get you to the hospital. And Amarillo should have gone straight to the hospital.
In those days, they had no EKG equipment or anything, even at the hospital. And my father was sitting there talking to the doctor, and the doctor was waiting for the technician to come that could operate the EKG machine. So we lost 10, 15 minutes there. They put the EKG on him, and that's when the doctor looked up and said, Dory Funk, you've had a massive heart attack. We're taking you to Amarillo to the hospital. Well, we should have been, if we'd have known, we'd have been in Amarillo already. So that was get him loaded up, get him into the ambulance. We had to wait for the ambulance too. So that's 20 minutes lost.
We were on the way to the hospital, and my father was in the back of the ambulance. He said, how much further, you know, he was having trouble talking, and he said, how much further do you think we've got to go? And he said, you know, and he says, and I says, not very far, Dad.
I was holding his hand. Terry was in the front seat of the ambulance, cussing the ambulance driver to go faster.
He said, well, I'm not going to make it. He says, I'm going. And that was the last words he said, I'm going.
It was crazy, but that's when he passed. And we went on, got to the emergency room, and they tried to save him, and it was all futile. It was over. There was no saving his life.
You know, it wasn't a great time. It wasn't a great time. That's not a great thing to remember, you know. It's a crappy thing to remember.
My father passed away. I mean, it wasn't, it was in the weeks, and he was gone, and it was left for me to take over the Amarillo territory, and nothing stopped. Wrestling continued. It engulfed my life. He took over ownership of the territory with me. We were partners in the territory for 1 year.
The one thing that killed Jack Brisco's career more than anything was when he got the National Wrestling Alliance Heavyweight Championship, because the schedule that the championship had just took Jack Brisco down so far. He was almost a shell of himself toward the end of his reign.
I was just very tired, very worn out. The deal with the NWA and the champion was supposedly 3 weeks on, a week off, 3 weeks on, a week off. Well, that's the way it started out, and then pretty soon everybody said, I want the champion, I want the champion. So that week off that I was supposed to get every 3 weeks just evaporated, and I was just working all the time and just like doing hour Broadways almost every night, and it would just get to the point where I was just exhausted.
They had a meeting of the board of directors, and it tied up at the end, and my brother got into Fritz von Erich was the president at that time, and it came down to 5-5, I believe it was, or 4-4, or whatever the vote was. It was tied, and Fritz had to make a decision on it. And my brother went ahead and he talked very strongly for me.
I convinced them that they should vote for Terry.
And the vote went my way. And that was a wonderful, wonderful thing to have happen to me.
That was a close vote, where they were going to go, Terry or Harley. And I think it had always been Dory Sr.'s dream. Both brothers would be the champion. And my guess would also be that Dory Jr. wanting Terry to have it, I would think Sam went along with it because of that.
And he had really what it took to be a traveling champion, to be able to draw money and to bring a different look to the title that Jack did and Harley and Dory did before.
I thought Terry would make a great champion. I thought he would represent what the board of directors would want for a world champion. He was my brother, and the name was already there for him. He was the box office attraction already because of who he was, because he was my bodyguard that went in front of me, because his last name was Funk. All this went to the direction of taking him toward being able to represent the National Wrestling Alliance as NWA World Champion.
The other guy that was right there with me that was tied in the voting was Harley. It was business, but he's my brother. Harley is my brother. One of the truly great in-ring performers, probably a hell of a lot better than me, I'm sure. And I was lucky.
It was laid out to me that the Funk brothers, if they could put the belt on both of them, that I had two people to work with on a worldwide basis.
to Jack, it was 6 months overdue. I mean, Jack had hit the wall, as they say, and he'd hit the wall several times before and he'd run through the damn wall. The NWA World Champion has a schedule that's a nightmare. Then very few people can even understand it. Jack made up his mind when he was going to do it and where and how he's going to do it, and that was it. And they selected Miami and Terry Funk, and Jack went down and he did it.
My brother was supposed to be in that match, and that was the whole idea of everything. You know, was that my brother was supposed to be in that match, but we shot him a ringer because they went ahead and shipped me down there and pulled my brother out, and Jack had prepared for my brother and instead of preparing for me, you know. So we kind of pulled a surprise on him, you know, and it worked.
For Dory to go 69 to 73 with the title, and then 2 years later Terry win it, I think it showed the confidence that the NWA had in not just the funk style, but the funk name. The importance of the brothers holding the NWA World Championship and being the only brothers to do it, I think was a great footprint in history.
I always admired Terry just for, he was just always a pro, you know, always a pro in the ring, always. Right from the beginning to the end, he was always a pro. Everything he did looked great. He emulated, for me, growing up anyway, and being clued into wrestling from, say, my teenage days on, like growing up watching him. He was everything that I wanted to be in a wrestler. He was a scrapper, you know, he was a knockdown, drag-out kind of wrestler that could go in there and brawl with guys.
Terry Funk was a tough individual, creative individual, and a real superstar in the wrestling business.
Terry is a great babyface. He's a great heel. He can brawl. He can scientific wrestle. He can do whatever you need to tell your story.
Terry was not your traditional NWA champion because he was a little off his rocker even back in those days. And the NWA champions typically were guys that had it all together. They might be brawlers like Harley Race or technicians like Jack Brisco. Well, what you did in Terry Funk was you combined the two because he could do both. But he was a little off his rocker. He was a little out there.
Terry Funk would have them screaming before he got to the ring. He would cuss everybody in the building. And by the time he got to the ring, they would say, "Kill him, Bob, kill him." And he was a completely different style wrestler than Dory, of course.
Terry Funk was a maniac. Terry Funk was crazy. When you were with Terry Funk in a match, you were in a fight, not a wrestling match.
Terry could be a horrifying experience because you never knew what that crazy goof was going to do. And he would physically beat you up, not so that you couldn't wrestle the next day, but he was very physical.
I love Terry. I love working. I love going into the ring with Terry because it was a guessing game every time he stepped in the ring with him.
Terry could be a serious wrestler. He just was entertaining. He knew how to be entertaining. And maybe a little too much for some guys' taste, but for me, you weren't sure how crazy he was, and I don't believe Terry knew how crazy he was, and sometimes he let that crazy overtake him, and he took one or two steps too many, but that was the great thing about him.
Terry Funk was, to me, will go down in history, one of the great workers of all time, and you know, Terry could be serious or he could be funny. He had the ability to take it like Murdoch, even in his best, when he was at his peak. As a serious worker, he could interject a little bit of comedy and get away with it.
Terry is unbelievable. I think what he's done in his profession, ain't nobody gonna touch.
I knew what I was going to do in my own mind at the time as I wanted to run as hard and fast as I could and as quick as I could. Because at that time, as I had gotten a divorce from my wife, and then we had reconciliated, I believe would be the proper word there, you know, and I had kept it a short period of time. I had 2 children and I was ready to get out of it, and I always felt that I felt like Harley was was the man. And I felt like if I got out quickly like that and everything else, it would be impossible for them to, for the National Wrestling Alliance at the time, to create another one. And my brother felt the same way too, you know, but I mean, we always thought alike. But they didn't have the time or the ability to create somebody else because Harley was up there and in that position at that time, and I thought that was wonderful.
Well, that'd be Terry, which gave me talking points that no one else ever been in wrestling had. I took it away from both those Funks.
Did a fabulous job. Excellent. I thought he did a terrific job.
Terry was just that good. I don't think Terry ever got the credit for, even though he had the title just for 14 months, which I think was kind of his plan, you know, of doing that. Because everybody sees him as hardcore, and everybody sees him and all that, and he certainly was all that. But that year and 2 months that he was the heavyweight champion of the world, he was great.
One of the things that made them so successful was they were able to see the future of wrestling, where it was going to go, and find their place in it and really prosper, really do well. And one way that they did that was Japanese wrestling.
My father, Dory Funk Sr, was the first booker for All Japan Pro Wrestling. So he was the booker, and he had me as the NWA World Heavyweight Champion. So he was primed to be the booker for All Japan Pro Wrestling. Now, when he passed on, somebody had to take his place. And we sent word to Japan that Terry and I would become the bookers. And word came back, that won't work. One person has to be the booker. So once again, family selection took place, and I became the booker for All Japan Pro Wrestling.
Shohei Baba, he went with us. And that was a wonderful thing for him to do, was to go with us whenever he had a choice. And that choice at that time was Vince McMahon or us.
Dory Funk Jr. and his brother Terry in particular were the two that were able to become heroes in Japan. And not only that, but really assist, one of the strongest promoters in the history of the business, Giant Baba.
His word was good. His word was wonderful, anything that he said is he did, and it was a great guy to be around.
He was a genius as a boss, as a worker, as an athlete, and as a professional wrestler.
It started, I think, with Dory, because Dory would take the title in Japan. He would defend it. Dory was really the first world heavyweight champion. I think Kanisuke went there a couple of times, but Dory went there, quite often, and he would go 90 minutes, with Inoki, or he would go, with Baba, or whoever was there. So to see the world heavyweight champion, the American, coming, and you're talking just, 25 years after World War II. And for Dory to be there, and then of course Terry doing the same, I think they have great respect for them, not only for their skills in the ring, but the fact that they really had admiration for Japanese wrestlers and the country to say it's important enough for us to take the world title. If it's the world title, it doesn't need to be just here in Canada. They actually took it around the world.
Terry and I made many trips over for All Japan Pro Wrestling. We were like the prize for All Japan Pro Wrestling.
They were the linchpin of the American wrestlers in Japan, and linchpin of the American wrestlers in All Japan Pro Wrestling.
They were the big team. They were the big Gaijin team.
The Funks, yeah, they were big names over there too, and very good workers. And I think the best part for them is they knew how to do the business, and that was in the ring.
The Funk brothers were arguably as big at one time as any Gaijins were ever. I've heard it pronounced Gaijin, I've heard it pronounced Gaijin, but the foreigners, they were probably as prominent as any foreigners, especially tag team.
They became so popular that, you know, they were basically more popular than the Japanese.
Japan loved winners. I mean, they wanted to root for somebody they thought was going to win. And if you've been a net champion, you've been a world champion, therefore they knew that you were a winner, and that's how they liked seeing what you did. And the Japanese people like to see the winners. And so therefore, I believe that's why they drew a lot of people, why they were so popular.
It was a wonderful thing that happened to the Funk family whenever we tied in to Japan. That was another 20-year experience over there, you know, that people don't even know about over here. There was a war going on over there that we won.
I never thought them as being in war against each other, but obviously there's two big, larger than life's great characters, Inoki and Giant Baba, and they were both very good at what they did.
All Japan was Baba, and they were at war with Inoki. They're big rivals, kind of like WCW and WWE. So when I was I was for Inoki in New Japan, and but I know the reputations for both companies was they both had, you know, top stars and had their own way of doing business. But the Funks always had a huge reputation in Japan, both Terry and Dory, and they never let anyone down. I think they had that in Japan. You have to understand about Japanese culture and Japanese wrestling is that pro wrestling was in the sports pages. Like a whole section in the sports pages was dedicated to pro wrestling and the results and who won and who was champion and the competition between these two major organizations. Wrestling in Japan was unlike anywhere else. I mean, it was in a special sort of category because it was, they went to great lengths to protect the business.
You also had to understand the Japanese people. When I first went to Japan, showtime was 6 o'clock or 6:30. Business people came after work. They wore suits and ties. At that time, they were mostly adult, and they were very, very quiet. Even though they were quiet, I could feel this, they were extremely interested in what was taking place. So many American wrestlers would come over there, they'd hear this silence, and they'd get nervous, so they'd try something else, and they'd throw a fist and poke in the eye and pull hair. They'd get no reaction at all because the fans didn't believe in that. I found you could go over there and wrestle, and you had their attention throughout the match.
They referred to it as professionally as pro wrestle. And if you were pro wrestler, oh, hands off. And they respected you. And it was very physical. The guys over there learned the hard way.
You had to be tough over there too. You had to be able to hold your own, you know, in Japan, or else they'd eat you alive.
They wanted fans to believe that what they were doing in that ring was 100% legitimate.
The Japanese media was kayfabe, but they weren't clued in, and so when they saw a match between two wrestlers and the feud going on, they wrote about it in the paper like it was real.
It was the greatest money in the world at the time. It was better than New York. It was better than anybody at that time, you know. Back then, $10,000 a week was never heard of in New York even, you know. But back then it was possible to make that in Japan.
So many wrestlers would come to Japan and lose it. That was until the Sheik and the Butcher came over. And there we had some really wild and crazy guys. The fans already liked my brother and myself because of the way we presented ourselves in Japan. And when Butcher and Sheik came, man, the fans went crazy.
The Funks versus Abdullah the Butcher and the Sheik from All Japan Pro Wrestling, because it was so different than what Jumbo was doing and what Tenryu was doing and of course Baba-san. It was so different, and then just knowing the politics behind Sheik and Butcher and, you know, no one wanting to do the job, and, you know, it's like, all right, how are they going to do it? But it made for some entertaining matches that drew a lot of money.
And that just goes to show you how good both Dory and Terry were, that they could adjust their style.
There's no more classic feud in professional wrestling than Dory Funk Jr. and Terry Funk versus Stan Hansen and Bruiser Brody.
Hang on. Those guys were tough.
They were as tough as you get. Watch them to this day and age. They were very, very physical.
Wild matches because there was, you know, Brody and Hansen weren't going to back down, and Dory Funk and Terry Funk weren't going to back down, and then just the creativity of the Funks and how they sold, how they wrestled, just really set that off.
They were the established team, and they had fought hard and worked hard to get in that position. And here's a couple of young guys that we both went to, Frank and I both went to West Texas, though they didn't break Frank in like they did me. But I mean, you know, they knew Brody well and everything. And we were the young guys, you know, and we wanted to be where they were. And I'm going to tell you, it was intense.
Stan Hansen was a middle linebacker. Brody played on defense. Stan's clothesline was not what we think of as a clothesline where you stick an arm out there. It was a middle linebacker coming in and sliding off just to the side and catching you with a shoulder block. I mean, when you took Stan Hansen's clothesline, you knew you were clothesline. The same with Bruiser Brody's drop kick. The same with Bruiser Brody's body slam. The same trying to fight Bruiser Brody on the floor, outside the ring, through the fans, up the aisles. It was a wild and crazy way to go.
Arguably the best tag team feud in the last 25 years in a lot of ways.
You know, I mean, you know, wrestling's wrestling. But let me tell you, that is about as intense competition as you can get. I mean, real competition. They were fighting to keep us down, and we were fighting to get on top. And I mean, you just look. I mean, that's why it was so good.
Inoki, his office went for very much of the Tiger Mask style at that time, a very different style than what we went with. And they had a lot of superstars. And we went, you know, even Cassius Clay, whenever they had the big fight over there. But we went with being very physical, and that's how we were able to stay in the game. Why did I do that? Why did I retire then? I retired for a reason. And it was with Baba's graces that I did retire. And what it was is I told, you know, it was like 18 months. And I talked to Baba ahead of time, you know, well, you know, and New Japan, not all but Japan, but New Japan had just gotten very, very strong at that time, and we were having problems, and they had taken a couple of guys. Well, they just took Brody, you know. But at that same time, you know, I said, well, we've got to do something,
and it worked. You know, I mean, you know, you can criticize it for the fact that he retired and then he didn't retire in Japan or anywhere else, but it was a story that captivated people, and it was exactly right. I mean, you know, the rivalry, the promotional war between Antonio Inoki and New Japan Pro Wrestling and Giant Baba and All Japan Pro Wrestling was very serious, and Brody was a free agent in the truest sense of the word, and he, you know, and it wasn't the way it is now with the contracts where you've got some time. Guys worked on handshakes and they worked on deals, and so they could jump. They could jump from one promotion to another pretty much immediately and and Brody being a major star leaving like that had an impact. And he's right. Terry Funk is right. All Japan had to come up with something that would take the attention off losing a major star like Bruiser Brody.
I said, well, what if I announce I'm going to retire in 18 months? And as it goes down, I said, I will retire. But as it goes down, it'll become hotter and hotter and hotter and hotter. And it did exactly that, and I did retire.
Maybe it marked a turning point in the volatility of the Japanese wrestling fans, because they were crazy that night, in support of Terry, in support of myself, in support of what professional wrestling was and meant to them.
He just played it to the hilt. I mean, he really did. That is an iconic moment in Japanese wrestling and professional wrestling, his retirement speech.
And I did stay out of there for over a year, And then I looked at my bank account and I had about $3,000 in the bank, and I decided I can't retire any longer.
In truth, he was back the next year, so in the ring wrestling again. So he had a couple of retirements.
So I've done a few things like that, with great intentions of being a mastermind at some unknown business or something, create a new business and everything and become wealthy and rich and stinking rich, but it never happens. And I always come back to my business, which has always been there and been wonderful to me. And it's been the greatest thing that has ever happened to me as a wrestling business.
It was a great business arrangement, or at least seemed to be, because they were able to get some good guys here, but they were able to get that steady stream of great talent, to Japan. And I understand, they made good money in Japan, and that wouldn't have happened if it hadn't been for Dory and Terry, and even some with their father early on, opening those doors.
They owned the Amarillo territory, but they were one of the first to realize the territories, unless you had the strong territory that could go nationally, that could win the wrestling war, that they were going to lose. And so they sold their territory. They sold Amarillo to Dick Murdoch and Blackjack Mulligan.
We sold it to Mulligan and Murdoch. And and I told them at the time, and my brother was with me, but we told them at the time that the business is changing. And they still wanted to buy it.
Could have been the right thing to do, and it could have been the wrong thing to do. I'm not going to look back on it. It was a good territory, but there was so much that they were facing coming up through Vince McMahon Jr.
That's business. That's the way the industry was going. And they had an opportunity, to work with Vince, and especially as Vince, started to make that climb. And so, of course, Harley went there. The Jack and Jerry, went there as well. So it just kind of seemed, I wouldn't necessarily a natural progression, but that's how the business went, and that was the direction business was going. And NWA had changed, territories, had changed. Now when cable came in, made all the difference in the world. And so, for Dory and Terry to go up there, it actually made a lot of sense.
They were going to go where the money was, and there was money in the WWF in the 80s.
You got Dory Funk Jr. You got Terry Funk. Who didn't he get? He got them all. Eventually, didn't he? So he's always had the door open. I mean, he just was going to lure every star there. And because of the way the marketing was set up, the promotion was set up, they could make more money with Vince.
Everybody was coming, whether they lost their territory or whatever happened. People needed to eat, and they needed to make money, and that was the place to make money.
I went to work for WWF because you can make more money up there in less time than you could anywhere else in the country. That's exactly why.
They said, we're going to put you with Terry Funk and Dory Funk, who's going to be your new tag team. It was really a thrill for me because, number one, I knew we were going to make a lot of money because these guys were great. And just by me being with them, it just put more credibility into Jimmy Hart. And I was just so thankful and so grateful.
I went up, I was there for 10 months, had a fabulous time, traveled every day. It was first class travel, different major city every night.
WWF at that time, unlike every other wrestling promotion, did not acknowledge that Dory Funk Jr. and Terry Funk were former NWA champions. They didn't acknowledge their past at all. Called Terry Funk, and then renamed Dory Funk Jr. Haas Funk. And there was a lot of fans that, of course, watched WWF who knew Dory Funk Jr.'s past, knew of these guys as stars.
I got to say, I always liked Dory as Dory. I wasn't big on Haas, certainly.
Schedule was god awful. I think I had about, the first time I had about 20-some days off, and the first 6 months or something, or the first year, it was just hell bent for leather. It was just pedal to the metal. They were short on talent at the time.
We were on the road quite a bit, but we made good money back then too. And it was just different. There were no guarantees back then. So if you were sick and wanted to take times off, it's like Arn Anderson says, somebody would come and get your spot.
The schedule was so rough. I mean, you have to think about what that schedule must have been like for the WWF performers then, where Terry Funk just throws up his hands and says, I got to go home and visit my horse.
Every time Vince sees me now, I go to some of those deals at WrestleMania and stuff like that, he always says to me, he says, how's your horse?
At the end of the 8 months, I had a commitment to Japan that I had to live up to. And I called Vince and told him, and I left WWE.
With Terry Funk, he did commercials, he would do television, he would do movies, and he kept himself out there. He would take time off from wrestling to try something else so that people didn't get sick of seeing Terry Funk.
That I was a lot smarter than what you think about that, because I know that in my business that it's really no medical insurance whatsoever at that time. Nothing. No insurance on your family, which is a huge thing. And it was a huge thing back then. It was a very expensive. No retirement in this business whatsoever. So I looked at that business there. And that was the film business, the movie industry. And I found out just through, and commercials, found out that by making commercials, national commercials and stuff, that if I made a certain amount a year, and at that time it was only like $7,500 something, but I would go out there and I would make that $7,500 to qualify, to be a member of SAG and to be be a part of them and to work on my retirement. If I made $9,500, $15,000 or something like that I would have total hospitalization for my entire family for the entire year.
He kept things going for himself. He wasn't just a pro wrestler. He was an entertainer.
So I went out there and I'd go out there and I'd go make that. Wasn't easy getting the jobs, but I'd go out there. Did a lot of commercials, did a lot of TV shows, did a lot of everything, and was successful at it. But then I got along in there. Pretty soon I look at it and I know that I look down there and it's, well, if I can go ahead and be successful for 15 years, I can go ahead and I can have total retirement. So I'd make that my qualifying amount every year. Did it for 15 years, so now I'm a retired artiste. That isn't bad, is it?
I really enjoyed 1989 for a lot of reasons, but one of those reasons was the fact that I got to call the Flair Steamboat 3-match trilogy.
I remember in 1989 when Ricky Steamboat returns to the NWA and has this just amazing feud with Ric Flair. And for me being almost 16 at the time, I didn't get to see the Flair Steamboat matchups from the late 70s, early 80s. So when Steamboat came back in '89, you know, I was so excited. And Steamboat beats him for the world title. There was just something, you know, you were always seeing magic with those guys. And you also knew that it was going to come to an end. You know, you knew Flair was going to get the belt back.
Flair and I had what everybody's referring to now is the trilogy matches. You know, the one in Chicago, New Orleans, and then Nashville. In Nashville, on the third series, Flair was getting the championship back. He had no problem. I was looking at a slew of return matches. Of course, there's that word assume, always gets you into trouble. So at the end of the match, Flair wins the championship, and as I'm leaving the ring, I see Funk come running down and blow right by me and jump up in the ring, and Flair and him are going at it, bang, 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 and I think the end result to where Terry ended up pile driving him on the table.
I knew about it, but I didn't know exactly. I sure didn't know I was going through that table.
Really? You didn't even know that?
Hell no.
Yeah, it was just a spontaneous thing?
That's what started this stuff with Ask Tommy Dreamer. That's where they got the idea to start doing tables and that. You know, that table wasn't good. It broke my neck. You know, I wasn't mad at Terry, but that was in there, man. You know, those pile drivers and tables, there's no way to do it. And have it look good.
Pretty amazing thing. And pretty awesome thing, you know, that had never been done before. I don't think it's been done much since then either.
Terry just ad-libbed. I certainly didn't discuss going through a table and a pile driver with him.
Flair smartly, like they don't do today in wrestling, you know, they took Flair off the shelf to sell the injury, to sell the attack. And then so it was up to Terry Funk to keep everything going, and he was just so creative in his promos of ridiculing Flair, ridiculing his nose and how he looked and his horse teeth.
He was a Barbara Bush lookalike. And I don't know, sometimes I get I get a little too fired up and too close, you know. But he really didn't look like Barbara Bush. He didn't. I know he doesn't. No, don't tell me he does. He doesn't look like. He does not.
And he had a nice rivalry with Rick. I mean, professionally and personally, they had a good rivalry. And sometimes Terry would get really out there. The one time he did the interview with the late Ron Ames, where Ames was in the Ric Flair get-up and had the wig and the deal. Rick didn't like that at all because he thought it was demeaning. And I remember having a conversation. I said, "So you were pissed off that Terry had a guy impersonating you?" "Yeah, I can't believe you do that interview." Well, so if you're angry about it, what do you think your fans are? And if your fans are angry, that means the villain you're going to work with has heat. That means that everything's going to be easier for you. And so obviously he relaxed and it was good.
As a wrestler, as a guy that's done booking and stuff like that, you always worry that your top program is so hot that when that ends, the next program is not going to be as hot. But Terry knew what to do. Like, he took what Flair and Steamboat did and he kept it on that level.
I loved working with Terry too. I mean, it's funny, I never thought of it as being a great match, but everybody loves that match we had in New York, that Clash match called
New York Knockout?
The I Quit thing. Yeah, I think that was a good match, but I mean, Terry and I had better ones than that, but fans loved that match.
I bet Rick's asked about that a lot too, you know, but I am and he is and everything else. But we had that feud going in WCW and the hottest feud in the world, you know, and for some reason somebody didn't like it.
Usually, things like that are cut short because of politics.
Unfortunately, Jim Herd looked at Ric Flair and even more at Terry Funk and because of his age and wanted him out of the ring, even though the fans didn't.
I think the committee was the one that wanted to kill the program because they wanted to have the Four Horsemen reunited, which was about as old as my grandmother's tits, you know. Nobody wanted to see that. But Terry had a great run. We had well over a year. You know, every major city 3 or 4 times. How many times can you do the same dance with the same girl?
A legendary feud in the career of 2 of the top wrestlers of all time, Ric Flair and Terry Funk, and those matches and intensity hold up today.
I love being my own boss. You know, that's the most important thing in the world to me, is being my own boss. So how do I be my own boss? Is there's a place up there called ECW. So I go up there. It wasn't even called ECW. It was just called Eastern Championship Wrestling at the time. So I went up there to that place up there, and with Eddie Gilbert, of all people. And one night it was Todd Gordon that was running it, and Eddie, you know, Eddie and I were up there, and it was snowing and stuff, and terrible night, and just they had a god awful show and everything, you know, and I went ahead and I went out there and I got the microphone and I said on the microphone, you know, I said, ladies and gentlemen, just you guys have some patience, you know, and we'll get this thing going for you, you know, you fans, you know. And it was a horrible show, and they went ahead and the fans just kind of got into that, and they believed me. And the shows improved, and the boys improved, and everything got better.
There might not be an ECW without Terry Funk. You know, ECW, again, might have been just another independent promotion that had local TV and, you know, might have lasted 2 years. But Terry Funk came in and started making the younger talent.
Terry Funk brought credibility to ECW, that Terry Funk went in there and didn't just make guest appearances, he was all in.
Terry Funk brought credentials with him that were second to none. NWA champion, you know, legendary. He just had come off TV with this legendary feud with Ric Flair in NWA and wrestling for the NWA World title. So he comes to this little promotion in Philadelphia, run by a guy who's running a pawn shop in Center City, Philadelphia, who ECW was his pie in the sky dream. And Terry Funk easily could have just came in and built Todd Gordon for all his money and just, you know, had the same match he had been having around the loop. But Terry Funk cared so much about ECW. Terry Funk wanted to see ECW do good. He wanted to see his friend Todd Gordon do good because Todd Gordon had, you know, risked a lot financially.
Terry Funk is, you know, he was the heart and soul of ECW. People talk about how Tommy Dreamer was the heart and soul of ECW, but if you ask Tommy, I'm sure he would tell you that Terry Funk was the blueprint for what he came out with.
For Terry Funk to go to Philadelphia in this small promotion and then interact with Shane Douglas, interact with Tommy Dreamer, interact with these newer names that Paul Heyman was building up, Todd Gordon, and they were building up as they were building up the name of ECW, Extreme Championship Wrestling. It gave them, there was no more credible name than Terry Funk.
What it was a place for wrestlers other than New York. That's what it was. You can say that Paulie Dangerously made that area. He didn't. It was made by wrestlers. It was made by a bunch of guys that busted their asses, that wanted a place to go ahead and make a buck, and a place to entertain, and a place to do what they loved. That's what made that place.
Terry knew how to treat people, and you know, he knew that there were guys out there with this willingness to learn. And from a business aspect of it, he also knew that if he helped create all these new stars, that he could make money with them, you know, working on top with them.
I love my business, and I continued to wrestle in it and tried to see that it went forward, but there was just so many guys that busted their asses and knew they had to bust their ass because that was the only other place at the time that was, and they actually did not compete with Vince, not at all, but they actually did put together a very successful promotion.
If it hadn't been for Terry Funk, ECW might not have been anything, because Terry Funk said ECW is worth working for, that it started bringing other name talent into ECW because
of Terry Funk's stamp of approval.
When he had changed the style in the early 90s and went to FMW and stuff and started doing hardcore wrestling, he inspired a new generation of wrestlers that wanted to be hardcore.
Why did I go to Japan and get in all of those death matches? Did we have television? No. That's a big answer. No. We didn't have television. So we had to create a media source some way. This is my own idea. This is what, from the beginning. And what we did is we went ahead and went over there and we did stuff like, what would you rather see? Would you rather see Antonio Inoki put on the Cobra clutch for the 103rd time? Or would you rather see Terry Funk and Cactus Jack stick a pitchfork up somebody's ass?
Doing the wild death matches, the famous death match with Cactus Jack and the things that he participated in the other promotions to keep his name going and keep the money coming and just figuring out what he could do next, and pretty amazing at it. Always smart, always being able to get that rise out of the crowd, that emotion out of professional wrestling fans. I thought that he raised the level of that. There was an excitement in it, but it was also of those matches, particularly when you saw them for the first time, explosions, all that stuff. It was really a spectacle.
What we did is we captured the media's imagination. And that's what we had to do, is capture them in order to have publicity, because we didn't have TV, but we did it through the papers. And that's why we did it. That's why all of those fire matches started and everything and all of that. We had to have an audience. We had to have a place to let them know. How did we let them know that we were even out there? That was the only way we could do it.
He found a way to stay credible, stay relevant, because he was always thinking, what's the next thing coming in professional wrestling?
I left WWE, but I went back, was called up back again to take over and coach the WWE Funking Dojo.
We brought in Dory to train a lot of our young guys in WWE right after I first took over the head of talent relations job. And I think that that should speak volumes to what I think of the Funk legacy. Dory had a coach's mentality. I think he got that not only from his teachings as a wrestler, as a pro, but he also got it from playing football at West Texas. Coaching, he got it.
And he would take you for 9 days and basically run you through a 9-day camp.
It was a place that WWE worked with and sent their wrestlers to before there was NXT, before they had put so much money into their own developmental place. They trusted and looked at Dory Funk Jr. as a mentor and a teacher for their young talent too.
I thought Dory would be the ideal coach and teacher, and he was.
And he's still doing it today.
Professional wrestling is one of three natural sports. In the beginning of time, men either ran for their life, they swam for their life, or if they had a problem, they fought for their life. And that's professional wrestling. It's the oldest sport in the world.
I'd like to be remembered as somebody who can do it all. I'm not going to back off on the violent side either.
Ever since I was a kid, it's the way that I've made my living. I grew up, I didn't want to be a fireman, I didn't want to be a policeman. Whenever I got to be 20 years old, I wanted to be in a ring wrestling. It was my father's way of life. He was a professional wrestler. It's my way of life.
I considered it a fucking honor every time one of them would pull a fucking knife out at me. And believe me, it happened a few times. And I never, they would bring them back there afterwards, and I might punch them a couple of times. The police would afterwards, but I'd never send one of them to jail because they believed in me. And that's the most important thing, is the belief. They believed in what I was doing.
certainly have to consider them, certainly the first family of wrestling.
The Funk family legacy is to me, they're the benchmark for families.
A premier wrestling family in our profession.
The Funks were, really top talent in their own right.
They lived it, they breathed it, they were royalty in West Texas, or all over the wrestling world, actually.
There will never be, I don't think, anyone else like them.
They've left certainly an indelible mark in wrestling, starting with what Dory Funk Sr. had done in Texas, and building that territory, and then Dory having the title, Terry having the title.
They all reached the top ring in professional wrestling, and people are going to remember that because they were successful, they were winners, they were champions.
I think of legends, I think of innovators, wrestlers, promoters, bookers who stayed, a family that stayed one step ahead for decades of where the wrestling business was going.
The Funks were the ones. They were successful. They were successful in the U.S. They were successful in Japan. They were successful in the office. So to me, the Funk name is the measuring stick of what families could do as professional wrestlers.
There's something that was unique about the Funk, especially not only the time that they came through, but they were almost pioneers with an entire family.
The top is the very top of the wrestling world. They were during the NWA days. You couldn't beat those guys. They were automatic money.
I'd have to put the Funks up there at the very top.
I think they were one of the great foundation building blocks in pro wrestling, and the family is they've done an enormous service to everybody that's making a living in wrestling right now. Owe some debt of gratitude to the Funk family.
My father's legacy, great wrestler. My brother's legacy, a great wrestler who took it one step further. My legacy, a great wrestler that took it 2 steps further. Coaching, teaching.
All three of them were studs, and all three of them were money makers, and all three of them put asses in seats, and that's the legacy of the Funk family. They put asses in seats.
I don't know. I really don't know. And legacy is, I wish I didn't have to say this, but I'm going to be very honest with you. Probably not much. Not much. 20 years from now, not much. Less than what it's been right now. 20 years from now, not much. 50 years, forgotten about. That's the business.